We hope you enjoy your day at the Capitol, and thank you for bringing them. Yeah, thank you. Committee, I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 69. Amelia, will you give us an overview?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill number 69 relates to rural opportunity zones and would extend by 5 years the time period for eligibility for both the student loan repayment program and the income tax credit.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions since we have some people in
Certainly.
the audience. Yes. And would you explain a little bit about the program so they understand, and would they qualify if they're a Kansas student and they move back home after they graduate?
Let's back up just slightly. A couple of years ago, the legislature did amend the definition of rural opportunity zone, and that is defined now as a county with a population of 40,000 persons or less. So when that term is used in the two statutes that we're looking at today, that's what that means. Section 1 of the bill would amend the provision relating to the student loan repayment program. That program is administered through the Kansas Department of Commerce, and they have information, I believe, on their website and other information out there relating to eligibility and how to enroll in the program if you are eligible. There are requirements relating to which counties do participate, because not all counties participate in the program. I think there are also some employer provisions that certain employers participate in the program. So it is very individualized depending on location. So I would encourage those who may be interested to reach out for more information from the Department of Commerce. But this bill does extend the program for another 5 years because it would sunset. So now the provisions would apply until the end of June 30 of 2031. The other provision in the bill is an income tax credit for eligible resident individuals who move into a rural opportunity zone during the specific time periods. This particular income tax credit does require for eligibility that the person was domiciled outside the state of Kansas for 5 years or more immediately prior to establishing their domicile in a rural opportunity zone. So depending on what someone's residency currently is, that may prohibit some use of the program. But the income tax credit also is extended for an additional 5 years, so it would be through 2031.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? So with the sunset coming up, if somebody's in the program, say they're in their 3rd year and the program sunsets, would they still qualify for the tax credit, income tax credits?
Madam Chair, with respect to the income tax credit, I believe the income tax credit itself does end after 2031. So if someone qualifies for the first time in 2031, that would be the only year of eligibility they would have. I believe maybe there may be different rules for the student loan repayment program.
Okay. Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any other questions? Thank you. Our first conferee is Chad Austin. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. As was mentioned, my name is Chad Austin. I'm with the Kansas Hospital Association, and I do appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 69, which, as you heard, does extend the Rural Opportunity Zone program for an additional 5 years. The Kansas Hospital Association is made up of 121 community hospitals across the state of Kansas. Out of that membership, we do have 83 critical access hospitals, which are small rural hospitals throughout the state of Kansas, as well as 3 rural emergency hospitals, which is a new designation that has been put in place with hospitals on their delivery system. As you may have heard over the years, the healthcare industry is facing shortages of healthcare professionals, largely with clinical backgrounds. We've seen an increased demand in nurses, physicians, respiratory therapists, rad techs, and other professions. The KHA board and our members have recognized the need to lean into recruitment and retention efforts. KHA and our members have been innovative by leveraging the apprenticeship programs, which is now made available. In addition, promoting healthcare careers to high school students. And in fact, we just had our third annual high school virtual healthcare career day this past week, where we had over 4,000 high school students participating. And we're also exploring ways to support healthcare and through child care services within our communities. The KHA believes the Rural Opportunity Zone program has been a useful tool for Kansas hospitals and our industry when recruiting healthcare professionals to rural areas. We believe the program should be extended for an additional 5 years and possibly look at some enhancements to the program, such as a home buyer down payment assistance or child care stipends as options rather than the student loan program, which is still valuable, but may be something that recipients may want to look at different options or benefits. The Kansas Hospital Association and our members appreciate the support of the Kansas Legislature with this program and believe that it's essential to continue keeping recruitment tools in our toolbox rather than allowing those tools to expire. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chad. Senator Klemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I heard correctly earlier, you only get the credit if you come from outside the state. And if that's an accurate statement, why wouldn't we open this up to larger cities to bring some folks out of the larger cities within the state of Kansas? Because if we are really in pain in the rural areas, which I think we are, we might be able to get a whole lot of folks that already live in Kansas, love Kansas, but would move out to the rural areas to participate. Just more of a curiosity question to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, originally when the program was put in place back in 2012, it was much smaller in terms of eligibility of the number of counties. Over the course of time, it has been extended. There's been conversations, I believe, in the legislature of looking at expanding it to urban areas as well, but that has not occurred and no action's been taken on that, I believe.
Thank you, Chad. And I think he's asking, what if people from the large urban areas moved into the rural counties? Why wouldn't we let Kansans qualify?
Yeah, and that would be an option, I think, from our standpoint that we would support to be able to allow folks to move back to rural communities, whether they originated in rural communities or whether they lived in an urban community and would be interested in moving to western Kansas or one of the rural opportunity zones. Yeah.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On that topic, I don't know that this is necessarily a question for Mr. Austin, but I guess I would read on page 2, section 2, line 38 through 40, that they could be a Kansas resident. I have been under the impression that ROS included individuals who lived in non-ROS counties that were low income that moved to a rural opportunity zone county if they had an income less than $10,000. So I don't know if that's something we can get an answer at some point from research. Not necessarily today, unless you want them to do it right now, if they have an answer. But my understanding, I have been under the impression that it allowed Kansas residents from urban areas to move to rural areas.
Thank you, Senator Peck. Amelia, do you mind?
I don't know if I have entirely the answer here, but perhaps also the next conferee might clarify as well. But the language in section 2 is relating to the income tax credit, and that does have the requirement of being domiciled outside the state of Kansas for 5 or more years immediately prior. But I don't know if the student loan repayment program, which is section 1, whether that requirement really exists. That requirement may not exist for the student loan repayment program.
That's my understanding, that if it's a KU student and they move back to a rural or a Washburn student for today, and they move back to, say, Garden City, Finney County is part of the Rural Opportunity Zone, then they could qualify for the student loan program reimbursement portion, but they would not be eligible for the state income tax portion. If that's, yes, that's my understanding also. Any other questions for Chad? Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, next is Rachel Willis. We've got a substitute. Welcome to the Tax Committee. You'll have to let Rachel know we missed her.
Yes, I'm sorry. She was double booked this morning.
Oh, but I'm glad you're here.
Yes, I am Tricia Purdon. I'm the director of the Office of Rural Prosperity, so I should be able to answer your questions in particular to the program. Thank you so much for allowing us to testify in support of Senate Bill 69. The bill extends the program by 5 years for the sunset of the Rural Opportunity Zone program. It was originally introduced in 2011 and is one of the Commerce's workforce recruitment tools, which is used quite a bit across our state. The program is administered by the Office of Rural Prosperity, and which is part of the Quality Places Division within the Kansas Department of Commerce. Overall, the goal is a program to attract residents to rural areas where the program loses population and where they have been the steepest losses. The program has recently had increases in participation, which we've been excited to see, and continues to prove to be a valuable tool for recruitment. The state of Kansas has designated 95 counties as rural opportunity zones, which means that moving there comes with significant added benefits. The designated counties offer 1 or 2 individual financial incentives, depending on where you come from. The first is the Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program, and the second is the 100% state income tax credit if you move from outside the state into the state. These incentives are funded through a single appropriation of $5 million annually. The Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program offers $3,000 a year for 5 years to apply towards a student loan of eligible individuals, and that's split half locally and half by the state. Currently, 95 of the 95 eligible counties offer the Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program. 44 counties offer county sponsorship of the program, 6 foundations now, which is something we've added, and now 8 cities offer the sponsorship. With the state income tax credit program, the program provides a credit for 100% of the participant's state income tax liability for up to 5 years, so they can receive it up to 5. It is limited to the amount of the taxpayer's Kansas tax liability, and all 95 counties offer the income tax credit components. To be eligible for the state income tax credit, individuals must, and this might be for the Washburn students in the room if you're coming from outside of the state, you have to establish a domicile in the Rural Opportunity Zone on or after July 1st of 2011 and prior to January 1st, 2026 as the way the law currently stands. Must have been domiciled outside of Kansas for 5 or more years immediately prior to establishing their domicile in a Kansas Rural Opportunity Zone, and must have had no more than $10,000 in Kansas source income in any one year or 5 or more years immediately prior to establishing their domicile in the Kansas Rural Opportunity Zone. So, Senator Peck, your question is, they couldn't have lived in Kansas and received up to $10,000, but they still would have had to have lived outside the state of Kansas and maybe worked in Kansas and could not have received more than $10,000. The taxpayer may not be delinquent in filing any tax return with or paying any tax due to the state of Kansas or any political subdivision. We have detailed information tables that are in our testimony. If you'd like to, I can answer questions related to that. But generally, the RAWS program for Kansas has been a successful initiative supporting people who choose to live in a rural community. Many other states offer similar incentives, and currently Michigan is creating a RAWS program with an additional tier for critically needed jobs that can get a higher tier of benefits. This program will allow for expenses of relocation, childcare, and housing, in addition to student loan debt repayment. The continuation of the program is necessary and aligns with trends across the country. I urge the committee to favorably pass Senate Bill 69. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Committee questions? Senator Clamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have you done any polling on what are the issues that would be most meaningful for the folks that would like to move to those rural areas? And then it seems like there may be an opportunity for the lawyers to maybe take advantage of that in the higher tier opportunity that you talk about. Few questions there, sorry about that, but if you have an opinion on what's important, such as childcare, something like that, that might be meaningful to help
Yes.
them move out to those areas.
Absolutely. We regularly survey our participants, those that have applied. We've received, it's about 2/3 of the individuals that we surveyed that did apply for the program found it either extremely favorable or somewhat favorable for them to choose to move to one of these rural areas as this current incentive. But from those, we've had individual discussions with those around housing, childcare, start up a business, things like that, that could help them maybe relocate from an urban area, which they can do with the RAWS student loan piece of the program, to a rural community. Those definitely will be favorably received, but currently, as the bill stands, it only allows for student loan repayment. And remind me of your second question. Sorry.
I was just rambling, I think, on some of that, so, yeah, it was a fluid thought, I lost it, yeah. Yeah, thank you, thank you, yeah, Senator. So it would be, is this a moment for a higher tier for lawyers? Because we are very short out in our rural areas.
Absolutely. I served on that committee with the rural task force on rural judicial task force to address that concern. That is a huge issue, especially in those counties where there's maybe one attorney covering 2 or 3 counties right now. Inducing a higher tier of incentives definitely could make a lot of sense to provide that. We've also heard around building trades or specific trades that a community would identify as their priority need, would also be well received by the communities themselves.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Committee, our next conferee is Debbie Bruner from Mineola.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Mineola Healthcare is grateful for the opportunity to provide comments in regards to Senate Bill 69. My name is Debbie Bruner, and I serve as the Chief Executive Officer of Mineola Healthcare in Clark County. I appreciate the opportunity to submit testimony in strong support of the Rural Opportunity Zone program. This program has been an invaluable tool in our efforts to recruit and retain medical providers in rural Kansas. I have actually been a participant in the RAWS program, moving to Clark County, Kansas from Indiana 12 years ago. In the past 12 years, Mineola Healthcare has successfully recruited 3 physicians, a physical therapist, and numerous ancillary care providers through the RAWS program. And we are currently working to bring in a 4th physician. Recruitment and retention of healthcare professionals in rural areas remain a constant challenge, as we lack many of the amenities that often attract providers and their families. Programs like RAWS help level the playing field by offering meaningful incentives such as student loan repayment assistance and the 100% state income tax credit, which makes rural practice a more viable option. These benefits not only help us bring providers to our community, but also allow them to establish roots, invest locally, and build long-term connections that support retention. While the RAWS program has made a significant impact, we, along with KHA, believe there is an opportunity to modernize it further by offering additional incentive tracks. We encourage the committee to consider amending the program to include the homebuyer down payment assistance, as well as the child care stipend, which Chad has already referred to. An additional consideration that Mineola would like to see taken into consideration is the pre-employment monthly support stipend. We recommend adjusting or removing the current $10,000 earned income restriction that limits the impact of pre-employment stipends. Under the current structure, any financial support provided to recruits before their official start date is counted towards their income. And if it exceeds $10,000 per year, it disqualifies them from the RAWS program, the income component. This restriction limits our ability to offer meaningful stipends that could help ease the financial burden of relocation and transition into rural practice. By modifying this restriction, organizations could provide more impactful financial support to individuals prior to their actual employment, in lieu of a traditional sign-on bonus. For example, hospitals and healthcare organizations could offer a monthly stipend to medical students in residency as they prepare to transition into practice. Ensuring these stipends are classified as recruitment incentives rather than income would maximize their effectiveness and allow rural communities to remain competitive in workforce recruitment. We recommend that these new incentives align with the current student loan repayment assistance track, providing up to $15,000 in support, Expanding the range of incentives available will make the ROS program even more effective in attracting and retaining a strong workforce in rural Kansas. On behalf of Mineola Healthcare, I urge the committee to support the reauthorization and enhancement of the ROS program. Strengthening this initiative is essential to sustaining rural healthcare and ensuring that Kansas remains competitive in workforce recruitment. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Debbie. Any questions for Debbie? Seeing none, we'll turn our attention now to Amy. Amy, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name.
It's free off. Thank you.
Free off. Welcome to the tax.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, honorable committee members. My name is Amy Freeoff. I am the Director of Human Resources for American Implement. We are the John Deere dealership group for Western Kansas. We employ approximately 400 employees in 16 dealership locations, 15 of which are in Kansas. And we represent communities along the western border, all the way from St. Francis down to Elkhart and as far east as Oakley and Dodge City. So I want to thank you today for allowing me to speak to you in support of Senate Bill 69 and for considering extending this incentive program. I know we are all aware of the challenges faced by businesses in all areas of the state when it comes to recruitment and retention. We've all heard those terms, the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, and so on. And we're all also aware of the great financial toll that is currently affecting our state and nation in general due to inflation and the current economic conditions. This is especially true right now for the agricultural industry and our rural areas in general. It takes a special kind of person to live in a rural area. The smaller the community, the harder it is to both retain and recruit talent, especially when we're butting up right along the borders of Colorado, Nebraska, Oklahoma. And when you think about it, there's a really small, thin margin at the bottom of our part of the state where we're practically on the border with Texas as well. So that's 4 other states that we are in direct competition with when it comes to recruiting talent from outside of our boundaries. Now, at American Implement, we do know fully the value of growing our own talent to keep our population here in Kansas. We want our kids to stay in our communities when they graduate, and we want to bring our former residents back if they've relocated out of state. But the reality is those efforts are still simply not enough to provide sufficient candidates to fill the open roles that we have within our company and throughout our many rural locations. And this challenge is not unique to American Implement either. It affects many companies in Western Kansas, and it's often a topic of discussion between myself and other HR representatives within my local SHRM chapter here in Southwest Kansas. That is where the Rural Opportunity Zone program provides a great opportunity for businesses such as ours to succeed. I myself am also currently taking advantage of this program after having relocated to Kansas in 21. My parents were both Jayhawks, and in fact, they met on campus. But after they graduated, they moved away, moved out of state, and never came back. So I represent the boomerang in their place. Despite the generous relocation package that my company provided to me, my family was faced with some unexpected expenses that we're honestly still paying for. And the state tax credit has benefited me directly by helping to offset those expenses. And it's also allowed me to slowly invest and make improvements around my own home, such as planting trees and things like that, to just better the general community environment. And without this program, it would have been a lot more enticing for me to return to my previous employer when a higher level position became available there within a year of my coming to Kansas. But the ROS Opportunity Program, it weighed into our decision to help stay in Kansas. This program gives Western Kansas a competitive edge, and it makes us more appealing than those other states who do not offer something similar. As the HR director of my company, I make sure all of my employees are aware of this program. I encourage our recruiter and our hiring managers to share the information with any out-of-state candidates who are deciding between us and our direct competitor who happens to be located in both Colorado and Nebraska. I take a lot of pride and a little bit of enjoyment in being able to tell them that if they choose Colorado over Kansas, then they're going to have a family tax on top of their regular state taxes. But if they come to Kansas, instead, they may get back all of their state tax dollars for up to 5 years. I also ensure that my new recruits are aware of the Rural Opportunity Zone incentives by including it in my open enrollment presentations every year. The biggest challenge that I know of with this program is that nobody knows about, especially our tax professionals in this area. And that's why I'm especially grateful to the state for finally creating a flyer that we can share with our employees who can then in turn share it with their tax professionals. And I think that could be why you're starting to see an uptick in people utilizing this program. The only other negative issue I've ever heard about this program is when the local community does not want to participate, such as Sherman County and Goodland when it comes to the student loans. Even though a partial benefit from the state is better than no benefit, that does make them better than, again, the direct competitor located right across the border from them in Burlington, Colorado. And I'm not going to lie, one of my most favorite things about my job is when I have an employee reach out to me specifically to personally thank me for providing them with special benefits that make a positive impact on their lives and the lives of their family. And this is one of those programs that I receive those types of calls about. So again, I want to thank you for considering an extension of this benefit for another 5 years. I ask that you please vote yes. By voting yes, you will continue to make a positive impact on employers such as American Implement, located in the Kansas.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We do have your written testimony, and we've heard your compassion plea for this, but we do have another hearing on another bill.
Thank you.
Committee, any questions for Amy? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this is really for Amy, but I just want to follow up. I think Senator Trump was really onto something when he talked about making the tax credit available for people who are currently domiciled in Kansas in a county they wouldn't qualify, and then move to a county that would qualify. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm hoping that maybe that's something we can look at when we do work this bill. And if there's any information we could maybe get from research on how that would have a fiscal impact. But it's one of those things where there's no upfront cost. If it's utilized, that'd be great. If it's not, there's no real cost associated with it. So I just wanted to say that I thought that was a good idea, and I didn't want us to sort of pass over that too quickly. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So currently the program's capped at $10 million, and we're not coming close to that. Last I looked, it was between 2 and 3 million, I think, that's actually being utilized. But we can take a look at that and when we work the bill. So thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Amy. Are there any other proponents for the Rural Opportunity Zone? Senate Bill 69, no. Seeing none, are there any neutral? Any opponents? We'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 69 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 73. Amelia, will you give us an overview? And thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 73 relates to property tax and would modify deadlines for mailing property tax statements to taxpayers and certification of tax levies to the Director of Property Valuation to earlier than the current deadlines, and would provide for the county clerk's use of the previous year's budget when a taxing subdivision fails to timely file its budget. Specifically, the bill would amend KSA 79-2001 to change the county treasurer's deadline for mailing property tax statements and the additional tax information that's required, change the deadline for mailing those to taxpayers from before December 15th, moving it up to December 1st. Current law, as you may be aware, provides that property tax payments by taxpayers are due to the county treasurer on or before December 20th. And I've cited the 2 statutes there for you on that. The bill would also amend KSA 79-1806 to modify the county clerk's deadline to certify the county's abstract of value, levy, and tax to the Director of Property Valuation. Currently, that deadline is on or before November 15th, and it would move to on or before November 1st. The bill would also amend KSA 79-2930 relating to budgets. And it would provide that if any taxing subdivision does not present or file its budget information with the county clerk by 5 p.m. on October 1st, then the county clerk shall use the previous year's budget from that taxing subdivision and the amount of ad valorem tax to be levied that was on that previous budget. And the bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Kind of like this legislation from what I know so far, but in the Section 3 new language, that's a complaint that I have heard from county clerks, treasurers frequently. They do not get information, and some counties have multiple school districts that have just a little corner of the county, and sorry, I'm just going to use the schools as an example. They do not get their budget requests to the county on a timely basis. So this would require that by October the 1st, if that school district does not, then the county that portion of the district is in would say, you get from this county the exact same dollars you got last time you submitted a budget.
Madam Chair, yes, this would require that. Currently, there are deadlines for submitting their budgets to the county clerk, either August 25th or October 1st, but there's no consequence. This would provide that the county clerk, if they did not receive those budgets by October 1st at 5 p.m., they could rely on the previous year's budget and the tax to be levied.
So if the then information came in 2 or 3 days later, it would be up to the county if they amended. I kind of like this hammer, but I'm trying to figure out how it works because
this particular provision does not provide for exceptions. I think ultimately it would be up to the county clerk whether they've already done their work because they also have subsequent deadlines that need to be complied with.
No, you're welcome. And we don't have any clerks testifying on the bill. They did send written testimony, but I think it is a question that we need to pose. So thank you. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Amelia. Our first conferee is Senator Blue. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've never been on tax and I never want to be on tax. Yeah. So this is a lot of fun to be right here with you guys. This bill I submitted it last year. We had a hearing in the House on it last year. The chair didn't move on it, so I'm submitting it in my respective chamber this year. I work with my county treasurer. We had an issue in Barton County 2 years ago where our property tax statements were wrong. And they were mailed out on December 15th, and we all know the mail doesn't get to us in time. They were due on the 20th, and half of us didn't have our property tax statements yet. So the issue is the deadline is December 15th, and they're due 5 days later. That just doesn't make sense. So when I worked with my county treasurer, we worked on the timelines. I worked with the Division of Property Tax. Is that the right? And work with them on the certain timeline in the process. So that's how the dates came forward. The major issue I heard from working with a couple other folks was these smaller township clerks, they're not submitting their budgets. And so that's what's prolonging the issue with why sometimes they are not getting turned in on time or it's taking forever and so forth. And so this is just stating, okay, if you don't, a lot of these people don't, my road grader, he does a great job, but he's got other things to do, and they don't submit their budgets because they have other things to do, and nobody wants that job, let's be honest. So this just says, okay, then you're gonna, if you don't want to fill out the budget, if you don't need to increase, and we can just use last year's that already went through revenue neutral, so forth, and let's just get the process started, so hopefully we can get property tax statements sent out to people by December 1st. So I've heard that there may be some issues with some timelines. I leave it up to the will of the committee. If you guys have any suggestions, my ultimate goal is just I want property tax statements sent out earlier.
So Senator, I appreciate you kicking off this conversation, and Amelia has a very extensive schedule of all the different timelines, and we'll get that so we can hand it out to the committee when we do look at this, because it's amazing how many moving parts there are in this process, and it does have an impact. One of the things I would ask you, though, is, and we're going to look at changing the date. Currently, if a county remains, or a governing body remains revenue neutral, their budget is due August 25th, but everybody else gets a later date. So if you wouldn't mind some amendments to your bill, possibly?
I leave it up to the will of the committee on what you guys, like I said, my ultimate goal is just I want property tax statements mailed out earlier. And when you move one part, you have to move a bunch of other moving parts. And so you guys know this issue better than I do, and I trust you.
We appreciate you bringing this to us. Any questions for Senator Blue? Senator Clem.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator. You mentioned a road grader, just as an example. Do you feel like if you have, and I agree also with Senator Peck on the consequence, having a consequence for missing a deadline, do you feel like a road grader may not want the service and we might lose some services or folks that are providing those services due to the fact that they would be bound by last year's budget?
I don't have an answer to that. I just know that when I talked to my county clerk a while ago about this, and this was a previous county clerk at the time that was there for years, that was the biggest issue, was she's reaching out, I need a budget, I need a number, and they just weren't doing it. And so it's just, that's where I'm coming from on that. So I don't think I answered your question, but that's just the example of some of the issues of the timeline and why they aren't getting things submitted on time, because they're waiting for budget numbers.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, committee, I'll draw your attention to Jamie Doss' written testimony. We do have a neutral testimony. James Hall, welcome to the Tax Committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Jay Hall. I want to also acknowledge the Washburn class that's here. As a Washburn grad myself from the Political Science Department, I'm glad to see a lot of political science students here today behind me. We are neutral as KAC on this particular bill. I want to take my time, though, to try and address a couple of the questions that came up and offer a little bit of clarification. The first thing I would say is that, generally speaking, when it comes to the budgets themselves, it's our smaller entities, those cemetery districts, the townships, the library districts. It's those that are maybe not getting their budgets in on time, simply because when you talk about those folks, it's generally one person. If you looked at your ballots this year, if you looked at a lot of the returns, you notice that a lot of times we don't even have people running for township trustee, for example. And so it's hard to find people that are willing to do that work. They still have people that run the motor graders and things like that, but it's hard to find people that actually want to do the budget part of that. And so oftentimes our county clerks end up having to chase that information down, as you've heard before from some of the other conferees. So that's that portion of it. Whether or not this would affect them as far as being able to take care of their budgets is a question better left to them, but that is the issue that our county clerks face. As far as the dates, more of the crossover jurisdictions end up with problems because they're waiting on valuations more so than budgets. you may have, for instance, a school district, as the senator mentioned earlier, you may have a school district that has most of its district in one county, but may have 10 or 15 residents that actually live in an adjoining county. And they haven't gotten those property valuations because there was an appeal or there was some sort of other delay that has prevented the county clerk from that county from getting the valuations to the other county. So they have the budget for the school district, but they are waiting on the valuations from that handful of properties so they can send out accurate tax statements, because changing that valuation a little bit can really alter what your property tax statement says, especially when you're dealing with 10 or 15 properties. So that's the task that's faced. Now I'll turn to kind of the point that I made in my testimony. We are not opposed at all to this actual legislation. We do think that it is long past time probably for us to look at all of these dates, because there are, as you've said, Senator, a lot of moving parts to this. And we do need to make sure that as we change these dates, that we are catching all of the things that could domino as a result of moving around some of these dates. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on that. But we are excited to look at this, and it may be appropriate to have even an interim committee to have this sort of discussion so that we can really go through the entire calendar. I'd be happy to answer questions.
So Jay, thank you. And I know we're not on 1603, but you just gave another reason why 1603 would be good, because you know what the taxable valuation would be. You wouldn't be waiting for the actual valuation for that calculation. But thank you, committee. Any questions for Jay? Oh, well, okay, thank you. Jay, I appreciate it. I find it interesting. I have one other question. This is going to be a little difficult. So we have the county clerks and the elected officials proponent, then you're neutral, and we have two county clerks, or one county clerk in the League of Municipalities that are neutral also. I think you guys all have the same concerns. If we move it, make sure we're not negatively impacting something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
But
really
we
our
all
only-
agree that there needs to be something.
Yeah, and actually, we have no opposition to moving that date up, because there are problems with getting the statement. If you mail the statements after the 10th or 12th of December, in a lot of areas, there are problems with getting those actually delivered, because once we put it in the mail, it's kind of out of our hands as to when those tax statements actually arrive to the taxpayer. The only thing that I would observe with the December 1st is you're actually in some ways moving it up even a little bit earlier, because December 1st often falls the weekend or the Monday after Thanksgiving. And so you're probably actually moving that up to November 26th or something like that, because you'd actually be looking at the Wednesday before Thanksgiving to get a lot of that work done. But that's not in opposition to this. That's just kind of looking at, you're probably actually going to get those statements out even a little bit earlier. I'd also observe that a lot of counties already get their statements out fairly early, because they know that with mail, you have to get it out a little bit earlier to make sure that that the residents are receiving their tax statements earlier than the 20th.
Thank you. Committee, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Something Senator Blue said I've been sort of chewing on. I didn't ask her, so I will ask you. I heard her say that her county had mailed out their property tax statements and they were incorrect. So if a county mails out incorrect property tax statements on a timely basis, but then they realize they need to correct them, are there guidelines in statute to govern that? Because as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay taxes to the county and then trust the county or rely on the county to get my money back to me later.
So there have been, over the last couple of years, we've run into a couple of different software issues where the software they've put all the information in, and then the software, for one reason or another, without getting into too many technicalities, has spit out the wrong information. As soon as it was caught, the counties were able to go back and amend those tax statements. So there's nothing, I don't believe there's anything in current law that says that what you do in order to do that, but obviously we want to get corrected statements out there as quickly as possible. As soon as that error was recognized, that the numbers weren't adding up, at the county level, they realized that that must have meant something was wrong with the statements, and they got amended statements out as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jay, do you know if the abstracts have to be turned in before they can process the tax rolls?
Yes, the abstracts would need to
You know,
be,
the tax bills?
yes, the abstracts would need to be processed prior to turning in the tax roll so that they have that information. Otherwise, they're missing one of the pieces of the puzzle.
I was looking at the other neutrals testimony, and it says abstracts do not need to be submitted in order to mail tax bills. Existing requirements would make the proposed abstract reporting date unattainable. The current date for abstract submission is reasonable and appropriate, allowing county clerks to focus our attention on generating complete and accurate tax roll before we switch priorities to preparing the abstract report.
So that happens at the same time, but it's all part of that puzzle. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah, that all happens at the same time. It all works together. So I don't know that you can do one without the other, but I don't know that you could do the abstract just afterwards. I guess that's probably a better way to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Committee, I'll draw your attention to neutral written from Kelly Arnold and Spencer Duncan. Is there anybody that would like to testify as a proponent? Any neutral? Any opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 73. Committee, we will be working some bills next week, so please come prepared. We discussed a couple of them yesterday, and hopefully we can take a look at some of these bills that we had the hearing on today. Is there any other business to be brought before the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned.